I'll preface this by saying that first and foremost, empathy and compassion are needed for people who are suffering right now, or family members of the people themselves. That always takes priority in a crisis. That said, what crises do is force us to look at the structure that we're living in and understand what exactly went wrong. Not in terms of something like a virus, which we have to combat, but there are steps along the way that are going to make us reflect moving forward. Now, my good friend Mark Cornell, Open Mind Fitness on Instagram, posted in a Facebook group today about diet. And it's something as a health journalist I've looked into for about a decade now. And there was an article in Bloomberg the other day discussing how there's a rush towards processed foods right now. And I want to take a moment to differentiate between processed foods and dry foods, which are very different things. Now, I live in Los Angeles in a neighborhood called Palms, which is bordering Culver City. Most people know of Culver City. And if I were to walk a couple blocks east, there are 3 Indian grocers that I can get to. And if I walk about 3 blocks west, there's a halal grocery that is also stocked right now, and they have a lot of great dry goods. This is where I go normally to get my lentils, beans, rice, anything of that nature, coconut milk that my wife and I would use for cooking in general. What's interesting is those stores are still pretty stocked at the moment, and they have a lot of wonderful, inexpensive dry goods. If you go across the street from the halal grocery, there's a Ralph's. Ralph's is a big chain out here. And there's always a line at Ralph's, and they're out of a lot of things right now. They're constantly restocking and busting ass to make it happen. But I find it amazing that there's such a rush to places that we're familiar with. And if you don't know about these other places, you won't know what's inside there. Processed foods is part of the problem, the overall problem, the big problem. So let's think about this from a big picture perspective. Humans broke off in the lineage about 350,000 years ago from the last Homo species. And up until 100 years ago, we lived without refrigeration. That means that the idea of processed foods didn't really exist. If you trace obesity records from anytime before 100 years ago up until now, you'll see the way that chart goes. And so think about, there are a lot of things about coronavirus we don't know, but what we do know is people with immune deficiencies are dying the most, who have pre-existing conditions. And we also know that one of the biggest reasons we have so many people with immunodeficiencies is because of obesity. And we know that what leads to obesity is processed foods that are high in sugars and carbohydrates. The fact that people are kind of understandably doing a lot of emotional eating right now, the Bloomberg article specifically addressed Oreos flying off the shelves. It's understandable, but if you want to think about both individual health and public health moving forward, that's not going to cut it. So if you're someone who is not accustomed to cooking for yourself, well, welcome to the internet. There are tens of thousands of wonderful recipe sites where you can learn. So many of us have slow cookers now, or Instapots, which you can use as a slow cooker. I make a batch of dal every week, and probably for about $3-4, I get, 10 meals out of it, right? Along with some rice. And those are high in protein, good carbohydrates, something that's going to keep me healthy, no preservatives in these foods. When we come out of this, which we will, scarred, which we will, and we want to look at least one of the reasons America is at the forefront of this and why so many people are in danger of dying or becoming very sick due to this virus. We have to look at the very foundations of health, which begins with our diet. We're going to be in this for a while. Look for dry foods. Fresh foods, obviously, when you can, if you're cooking. When I go to the supermarket, I'm not having much trouble finding most produce. So it's there, you just got to cook it a little quicker. But look for dry foods. Let go of the processed foods. That's now, and it's always. But to build up the immune response that you need, remember one other part, which I'm trying to remember everything here, but with coronavirus, if you get an injury, a protein called the cytokine rushes to the point of inflammation in your body. And it creates inflammation to start the healing process. What's happening with coronavirus in the lungs is it's creating what's called a cytokine storm, meaning all the cytokines are rushing into the lungs, but instead of just attacking the virus, they're attacking all of the healthy tissue, which is creating a lot of inflammation, not only in the lungs, but throughout the body. So you might have read about a third or even a little more of Americans are in ICU right now, are in their 30s and 40s. It's not just attacking older people. And that specifically, the cytokine storm is happening in them, and we don't know why. Well, guess what creates inflammation in your body? Obesity, right? Sugar-rich, carbohydrate-rich foods, processed foods, help to promote cytokine storms. Right? Just in general, just a constant chronic inflammation in your body, not specific to the virus. But if you put all these factors together, we're learning one part of the story that we've kind of known about. We've always known it's there. Now we're experiencing it together. So let's eat a little bit smarter.